everyone, welcome to Creative Friday. This one is going to be a little bit different. I'm not going to be playing in my art journal. I'm actually going to be doing some scrapbooking. So this layout here is one that I made from the Lolly Doodle Close to My Heart paper pack. And every month I do scrapbooking clubs, and I always add in a bonus layout, and this is my bonus layout for the month of April. I'm actually ahead of the game, and I always make two because I create calendars all year long for my grandparents. So I'm going to show you how I did this, and then I'm going to show you an alternate take on the same idea. So it's going to be, this is kind of a nice graphic layout, and I'm going to do one that's also more artsy with the same sort of layout. So I'll set that aside. And I'm going to be using slightly different paper. This is also from the same paper pack, the Lolly Doodle paper pack. I'm going to use the pink side. And then I have, that is 12 by 12, and then I have this green pear cardstock, which is cut to 11 inches by 11 inches. I'm going to do my embossing on it first. So I'm just going to rub over top with my powder bag, and that just helps so that there isn't any static cling on the paper. Sometimes that embossing powder just wants to stick to everything. And the stamps that I'm using are from this set. It's called Feathers C1584. And I have them all mounted on blocks here already so that I can easily just grab them and keep on going. And I'm using my Versamark pad. This is a Dazzle pad, so it's a little bit metallic, but it doesn't really matter because I'm working with white embossing powder, so it's going to cover it up anyways. Now, 2 pages never turn out exactly the same, so I'm just going to give it a go, and it probably won't look exactly the same as the last one, but that's alright. I have my scrap piece of paper here. Now I found it's really hard to try and stamp all the feathers, or even a few feathers at a time, without the embossing powder on there to show you where the feather is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp one, cover it with embossing powder, and then stamp another one, cover it with embossing powder, and just keep going like that. It's a little bit slower, but it's pretty much the only way for me to do it accurately and be able to somewhat stamp these in a straight line. Alright, so now I'm just going to continue on stamping and covering with embossing powder, and then I'll be back. Alright, so now I have my embossing powder added onto the stamped images. I have not melted it yet. I just used this Recollections Detail White Embossing Powder. It's called Snow, is the color. And now I'm going to melt the embossing powder. The easiest way that I found to do this is if you just let your heat gun warm up before you start trying to melt the powder, and that way it won't warp the paper as badly. You can also heat the back side of it a little bit to help even out the paper. Okay, now that's all melted. And maybe you will have noticed that as I was embossing, I didn't wave my heat tool all around. I like to just hold it nice and steady. It goes a lot faster, and the only time you really need to keep your gun moving is if it's something that you don't want to get too hot, like a really delicate paper, or if you're using like a paint stripping gun instead of a embossing tool that's meant for paper crafting. If it's too hot of a tool, then you definitely need to keep it moving. So that is done now. I'm going to bring in my other pieces here, and I'm going to ink my edges. I really like to ink my edges, kind of makes it look more finished, I think. So there's those. I have a 4x6 piece of gray cardstock, a 4x4 piece of gray cardstock. This is 3/4 of an inch by about 9.5, and this is 1 inch by about 10 3/4. And then I also have this zip strip, which is the little branding strip that says, like, close to my heart. It has the name of the paper on it, what colors are in the paper pack. Now this side has this cute little design, and I'm going to be using this in my design of my page. Special request from one of my customers. She wanted to see me use this strip on the page, so we're going to be doing that. And I'm just going to grab my slate ink here and my Tim Holtz inking tool. On these little strips, I'm just going to make little banner ends on them. So the way that I do that is I just make a snip up the center, and then I go from each corner and just connect those. Now I could double my paper over and do both ends at the same time, but I just kind of eyeball it. Seems to turn out okay. And then on this one, I'm going to put some washi tape on here. This is some close to my heart wood grain washi tape. Just gotta find the end. Just gonna put it down this orange strip here. Love the washi tapes. They're just so much fun to work with. So I'll just wrap those ends around to the back. And then I'm gonna cut this with a little banner end on it too. So my next step is going to be to color up my owls. So I have these two little owls stamped out. I used archival ink. You can use any permanent ink. And this is from Owls B1450, is that cute little stamp set. And I'm going to use some of my inks. So I have creme brulee. Actually, I'm going to use the ink that's in the lid. So I'll push them together before I open them. It's juniper, pear, and then I have hollyhock. And I'm just going to zoom in here so that you can see what's going on. Alright, and then I'm using my close to my heart blending pen. Just make sure it's clean there. And then I'm just going to start grabbing some color. Here's some juniper. Wherever you put the color down first is where it's going to be darkest. I'm not going to worry too much about my my lines or anything, because I'm going to cut these out. So if I go over the edges, that's fine. It's not a big deal. The trick I find with the blending pen is you have to move fairly quickly, and you don't want to leave harsh edges because they'll be really hard to blend out. So try and blend out whatever ink you put down while it's still really fresh. Make sure you soften those edges. And there's only so much ink that you can put on before, with the blending pen, before the paper starts to pill. Now it might be a little bit different if you used like a watercolor paper or something like that. But you can see even now I've gone over this section a couple times and the paper is starting to pill. So you just got to kind of work with a light hand and quickly and do little areas at one time. Now I'm going to go over top of these with my Wink of Stella clear glitter pen. Just give it a little shake here. And I'm just going to color over the whole thing. I'm not going to highlight certain areas or anything. I'm just going to cover the whole owl in my glitter marker. Oh, I love this marker because it has such a nice, delicate glitter and it doesn't obscure your image too much. It's hard to see on camera, but there is this really nice, subtle shimmer. If you've watched other videos where people have used the Wink of Stella, it's really hard to see on camera, but once you get one in person, it has a really nice wow factor to it. Okay, so now I'm just going to cut these out and then I'll be right back. Alright, my little owls are all cut out here and ready to go. So I'm just going to put them to the side. I also cut up the pieces of that strip that had the words on it and inked the edges, so those are ready to go. Now I just need to do a little bit of stamping right on my page. I like to do this before it's all mounted together, just in case I decide to use pop dots and just in case I wreck it. So I'm going to use the slate ink and I'm going to stamp this branch at the bottom. Okay. And then I'm also going to stamp the little leaves that go along with this. There are these two tiny little leaves. Just gonna ink those up. And then I want to put the little title on here that says You and Me. And I'm just going to use my black ink for that because I want it to stand out a little bit more than the branch. The branch, I want it to be kind of subtle. Make sure I get a really good ink on that. There we go. Perfect. It's always when you want to hold your breath after you've created everything and then you start stamping on it. Things can go very wrong at that point. Alright, so now I'm going to stick it together. right, and this is the page. It's all done. So I'll show you, this is the page I just made, and then this is the page that I made yesterday, where I kind of came up with this layout idea. And I would have liked to use more of this circle paper if I had some, but I was all out. So I just improvised, but I think they both turned out really cute. So next I'm going to show you a more artsy way to do the same type of layout. And I actually have pictures for this one too, so I can finish it right off. So this is my little bit more artsy take on the same type of layout. You can see that I didn't keep the solid bar right across, and that's mostly because this is going to be a 2-page layout. I went ahead and I made the first page, and then I'm going to show you how I did it by making the second page. Hopefully I can recreate it the same. Sometimes it's hard when you're working with color mediums to get them the same. This is Dylusions at the bottom, but I will show you that in the next part of the video. So I'm going to set that aside for now. The base of my page is Fundamentals cardstock from Close to My Heart, and they're really nice. They have a plain design on one side and then an enameled design on the other side, and they come in all neutral colors, browns and grays and black and that kind of thing. So I'm going to use the 2 black ones for the bases here. And then I have a piece of watercolor paper here that I cut down to 11 by 11, and I wanted to make sure like that I covered that whole space. So I had to use some rougher watercolor paper. I didn't have any of the really smooth paper that was wide enough. So I think this is a cold pressed watercolor, so it's a little bit rougher. So I'm gonna have to be careful with my stamping that I really get a good impression. I'm gonna go back to all these feather stamps that I used before. I'm just gonna slide this out of the way. You don't want to heat on those cutting mats. It's a Versamat from Close to My Heart. If you do heat on them, they will warp. Mine has warped because I used to heat on it and then I finally wised up. Just going over this with my embossing little bag again to get rid of the static. And I'm going to put my layout here so I can see what order I put those feathers in. And I'm just going to go ahead, like I did on the last layout, ink these up with Versamark and emboss them with white embossing powder all the way across. I'll come back once I have that done. Alright, the boring part is done. I don't know about you, but stamping and embossing, yeah, not so exciting. Necessary, but not so exciting. So now we get to do the fun, messy part, which I love. So on my other craft sheet here, this is one of the, I forget what size they are, but they're from Ranger, and I've taped my piece of paper actually right to it using some score tape so that it just allows me to handle it without actually having to touch the paper to get it to drip, and it should help hold it a little bit more flat because it is a little warped from embossing on it, and as it gets more water on it, it'll get more warped. So I have a misting bottle of water here, and then I also have Close to My Heart re-inkers in Juniper, Pear, Hollyhock, Sorbet, and Cotton Candy. Now, I used these on the first one, and I did not like how it looked. They just weren't vibrant enough. They got kind of diluted with all the water and kind of grayed out a little bit. So then after that, I added Dylusions over top, and I love the way that looks. So in order to get the same kind of look, I think I'll probably have to go through the same process. I don't want to do this page just with Dylusions because I think it'll be brighter than my other page, and yes, then I won't be very happy. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a coat of water just to help these float a little bit when they touch the surface. And I'm going to try and put these right on the actual feathers, just because I don't want the dots sinking in too much. I mean, it's not really going to matter as I start covering this up with stuff, but that's my thinking behind that. And then I'm just going to hold this up. Sorry if you can't really see, but I'm misting and dripping. Now I think my paper has just about had enough. It is getting very wobbly and warped. So what I'm going to do is just dry this and then add some Perfect Pearl mist over the top. Alright, you can see what I mean by messy fun. Now that I'm completely covered in ink, and this is after washing my hands, so this is staining on here. I went ahead and dried it all up. I inked the edges. You can see it is quite warped. I added a lot of water to this paper. So I could take the time and iron it, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to use some really strong adhesive and stick it down to the base page, and hopefully that should be good enough. Alright, now I have my piece of Fundamentals cardstock down there with that nice embossed chevron pattern on it. I'm just going to try and line this up in the center. Once you put that score tape down, there's no real moving it, so you want to be kind of happy with where it's at. Now I'm just kind of trying to get all those bubbles out and get a good seal on there. I might actually grab my bone folder too. And just really burnish that down on. Alright. That's on there pretty good, and it pretty much flattened it out. Looks not too bad, actually. Okay, so now comes the photos and the paper. Okay, now I have photos of all different sizes of my husband and I. And this is kind of the layout that I wanted it to be. So when it sits beside this page, let's see, move it over here so you can see, that's kind of how it's going to come together. And I like that. I didn't want it to be too straight since the background is so kind of artsy and messy. The cards I'm using here are from We Are Memory Keepers, I believe. And it's a whole line of chalkboard kind of patterns. I just pulled a bunch of cards here that I like. And now I'm going to have to kind of figure out how I want this. I'm not going to mat the photos. I'm just going to ink the edges of them to give them some definition. So And I don't think I'm going to go straight to the edge. So I'm just going to play around with this for a little bit, find the orientation that I want everything to be, and then ink my edges, and I'll be back. Alright, so I have my cards in the background, the 4x6 cards stuck down, and then I also have my picture stuck down. I did go over my pictures on the edges with archival ink. Some of them I should have let dry a little bit more because I ended up with some smudges on my pictures, but I don't like to wait. So, and I also edged the cards with the archival ink. You can use any black ink, but I just like the archival and it was handy, so I used that. And now I'm going to decorate my flowers. So I have here some pastel pencils. These are Faber-Castell pastel pencils. And they work really well for doing chalkboard type looks. You can see on my other page those little flowers, all the doodles and stuff. Those are done with those pencils. I really like the colors and they stand out nice and bold. So, let's see here. I'm just gonna grab these flowers. My embellishments aren't stuck down yet. They're just kind of sitting on top there. And I'm just gonna kind of doodle with my pastel pencils. I don't really have anything in mind. I will seal these afterwards with a fixative, otherwise they will smudge when your fingers touch them, and considering I don't usually put my pages into an album right away, it's probably a good idea. If I was putting these straight in my album, I might not bother, but I don't tend to do that. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit for you so you can see more what I'm doing. Okay, so there are my 3 pieces of flowers that I'm going to use. And now I just need a fixative. So I'm going to use this Spectrafix Pastel Fixative. And I'm just going to give this a light misting. And I'm just going to dry those up with my heat tool. Okay, so it's time to start sticking things down, making that final commitment. I'm adding glue. And I'm just going to pop those leaves down. I'm using Scotch Quick Dry. It's one of my favorite liquid adhesives for little things like this. Then I think I'm going to use a Pop Dot under the flower. And if you notice, to the middle of this I added a little brad that says unique. It's from the Prima Optimist collection, which I should say that's where these flowers and the leaves are from, as well as the brads are from the Prima Optimist collection. Now, I think I'll put the kind of more busy one at the top. Stick this one under here. I love these chalkboard flowers. They're so much fun to play with. I don't know if you can find any of the Prima Optimist stuff anymore, but if you can get your hands on some, it's definitely worth snatching up. pop some glue onto my rose, and I did ink the edge of my rose and my 2 leaves with black ink, the archival ink again. Put one of my lower pop dots under here. See if that works okay. Little Brad says love. I just took the legs off of it. There we go. And then my little flag, I'm going to pop that one up. This corner over here, and I think we're almost done. I also want to add some sequins on top of this to match the other page that I did. Oh, I haven't stuck this down yet. Be good to do that. Try to peel this up a little bit. Go. And I might add something more to that corner. Something to keep that kind of teal color going, because it's a little bit different than the green that I used down here, but I think if I have enough of it kind of spread out, we'll be fine. I think, yeah, everything's stuck on there now. And the only thing I really need to add are some sequins. Okay, so I think that's finished. Kind of bring that up so you can have a nice close look at it. And then I'll go back and do my journaling on those lines there later. Here's the matching page. I'll just zoom out a little bit. You can see the massive mess on my table. But that's how those 2 pages will go together in my album. So thanks for joining me today. I know it was a little bit of a longer one, but I really wanted to show you this concept of starting out with kind of a simple page and using the same idea to springboard you into something totally different. And I had so much fun making these pages. I love how they turned out. Please feel free to leave me a comment, ask questions. You can hop on over to my blog, which is personaltouchscrapbooking.com, if you want to see more of the things that I'm doing. I just added over there, I have a new online class using this Prima Optimist collection actually, and making an exploding box. So if you want to check that out, there will be a link below this video. Plus, if you go to my blog and click on online classes, there's a link there as well. And you can always find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called Personal Touch Scrapbooking, and all the links are on my blog and in the description box below. So thanks for stopping by and have a great weekend.